I suppose what Dennis brings to this conversation is an experience that stretches right across the conflict frame into the here and now. From Bloody Sunday to the secret dialogue between the British government and the IRA with Dennis and a couple of other men, from a city in the middle trying to link them up in a conversation which was about trying to achieve peace, onto the policing board when the RUC became the PSNI and we began this journey, what's called new policing. And 15 years ago, I was just thinking about that today, 15 years ago, the government appointed the Eames Bradley Consultative Group. And I suppose where I'd like to start with you, Dennis, is 15 years ago, did you think in 2022 we'd be going backwards rather than making some progress?
It doesn't totally surprise me, actually. And when you ask that question, this comes back to me. I was terrified and almost very negative about going into this process at all, and would have been easily persuaded that it wasn't doable, and perhaps even that it shouldn't be done. And then I heard one morning driving along a road, I heard a report, I think it was on BBC Radio 4 in the morning, out of Spain, that they were having trouble in Spain around their war, 40 years afterwards.
Their history.
Their history. And I think at that stage I began to think, well, we could end up in a similar type of situation. So I'm not totally surprised in that I'm not too sure that there are that many examples internationally of resolution, of repair, of reconciliation, of processes that deliver. I'm not fully convinced that that happens. But what I am convinced about is that I think that there's an obligation on us to try. I think there's an obligation on us to be responsive in that way, on behalf of the victims, but also on behalf of ourselves. Even though I say that I don't think the Ukraine will have any kind of response in that sense, apart from maybe a few trials about war crimes, I think that there is a responsibility on the community, for their own sake as well as those who have died, to actually have some type of reflection and response, where response is possible, to actually address. I mean, one of the deadly things about life, which is that violence creates mayhem, and that mayhem leads to death, and that death is so final and cannot be repaired. But what can happen in some ways is some kind of reflection upon it, some kind of learning from it, some type of understanding that deepens our humanity. And all of those things, I think, can come out of the past, but they're not easy.